Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Alexander Bon Miller. I'm the Executive Director of Boystomencanada, and I'm here with Sean Cameron. Sean Cameron was involved in Boys to Men as a youth. Maybe one day he'll tell that story. And now he's here to talk about the Circle Culture Academy, which he'll be leading and facilitating, and which he created also. And he works as a counselor. Uh, did I get that right, Sean?
Yeah, so to speak, counselor, psychotherapist.
Mm. Prior to that, he worked as a social worker, uh, and he lives out west. I'm out east, and thanks for coming, Sean.
Welcome.
So why don't we start with Circle Culture Academy? What is a circle?
Yeah, what's a circle? It's been a part of my vocabulary for so long because I've been involved with Boys to Men for so long. But, well, it's literally a circle. People sit in a circle, but what happens in that circle is there's kind of a microculture that values honest expression and truth that's underpinned by a belief that if we get together and honor the truth in a forum like that healing will happen. It's a place where we can unmask, say what's really going on, and with the help of some good facilitation, gain access to solutions to our problems, or even just expression to stuff that we can't talk about in day-to-day life. It doesn't fit into the macro culture.
Hmm. Yeah, when I think about circles in schools, I just think about the difference between a circle space and a classroom space, in which
Mm.
a classroom space is about teachers essentially judging performance and cultivating certain skills in order to achieve a positive judgment on on a report card. Or I compare that to like a space within the hallways with peer groups and adults who are supervising a circle space. I love what you said about unmasking, and also about it's a truth honoring space. So what do you mean by truth? Because in our culture, we tend to see truth as like a relative thing. So my truth and your truth may be really different. It may be a matter of disagreement, actually, for us to express the truth. So what do you mean when you say it's truth honoring?
Yeah, I think in a circle that refers a bit to personal truth,
Mm,
um, as in what's true for you, what's true about you. It's interesting that you brought up the classroom because a lot of the time when I work with youth in therapy, and I've noticed this a little bit in Boys to Men too, but uh, if you ask a young person a question about themselves, they'll get a little bit frozen
mm-hmm,
because what's the right answer? What's the A plus answer? What's the acceptable answer?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, there's something tragic about that. And you see it in really young children too, like the 8-year-old who visits your house and you say, do you want something to drink? Water? Juice? And they want the juice, but they're like, they don't know if they're allowed to say that they want it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And on a level, that's fine, but what if we get through our entire childhood with that mindset? Um, I don't say what's true about me,
Yeah,
not even what I need or want. What happens?
yeah,
Um, I guess we don't need to go into all the myriad consequences of that, but suffice to say, when I work with a 21-year-old who has gone through that process and they can't even begin to access their own autonomy or desires or needs, and we get these sort of like aimless boys or girls as well. Um, well, there's a reclaiming process to do. At that point, it's repair, kind
yeah,
of like how can we find your autonomy again? The idea, I think, of the circle with teenage participants, like what Boys to Men does, is we don't have to do that repair work.
Mm-hmm.
We can create a space where young people can speak honestly about what they want and what they desire, and there's no grading.
Mm-hmm.
Um, all you have to do is tell the truth, and then you'll know the truth about yourself, and maybe that will be useful in guiding you through life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the main tenets, I guess, of circle spaces that we aim to create and cultivate and steward um, is that truth is the hierarchy. And it's not just the power of speaking out what's true for you or even locating it within yourself, but also hearing people speak the truth is powerfully uplifting because it brings us into, I think, like an ecosystem that's much more ripe, um, well, for authenticity, and that's, being true, not just saying true things, but being true, being really at the sort of ground of being, rather than in persona, which is like, oh, I know what I'm supposed to do here. I'm not supposed to say I want juice. I really would like some mineral water, please. Thank you. Uh, no, actually, I want the Coca-Cola, whatever it may be. But, and we develop these like personas that really cut us off from ourselves, right? Cut us off from our authentic, natural expression. And then that can lead to those myriad of consequences, which is like alienation, right? And
Yeah,
aimlessness and purpose.
self-alienation.
Sorry?
Self-alienation.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
like, I mean, and this maybe gets deep for this conversation, but what happens to all those desires and truths if you aren't integrating them?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you still want juice, but it goes into the part of you that you disavow.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it'll find its way to express itself, and that'll be your weight issue, you know? That'll
Right.
be your addiction to sugary things that you can't seem to control for some reason. Like, why can't I
Yeah.
lose weight?
Yeah.
So it's just, you know, as an example.
Right. So if we bring it back to it's going to be hard for us not to go really deep, really fast. But if we bring it back to the CCA, so the CCA is a course or a training program for men or women to come into learning how to facilitate a space like that. So what kind of things would these people learn in the CCA? What kind of skills or what kind of orientations towards cultivating a truth honoring space? What would they learn?
Yeah, so this is the third iteration. I've done it twice before, and I think we're in a paring down process. There was I think the last iteration it was trying to be everything. And what I think it's distilling into is this is a 10 module course where you learn about circles and you participate in one. The learning model is a circle. So I think
Mm-hmm.
you can't really um, presence in a circle has to be embodied for you to really learn.
Mm.
So we actually create a circle model and then we learn in it. Um, as far as what participants learn, um, a little bit of theory
Mm-hmm.
about what a circle is, what a circle isn't, why they work, um, some pretty critical do's and don'ts that save a lot of time in making circles effective and powerful. Um, and then because we're in a circle, also some self-work. What do I need to do personally to be present in a circle? Am I ever present for an hour or an hour and a half straight
Mm-hmm.
without getting distracted or stopping listening to people?
Yeah.
Um, can I hold presence for that long?
Yeah.
Um, are there barriers to me speaking the truth? Because one of the, I think, wonderful things about um, circles, circle therapy, if you want to call it that, is that everyone, including the facilitator, tells the truth about
Yeah.
themselves. It's a very
Yeah.
like, even though the leader or the facilitator has responsibilities, and so they have a certain amount of power attached to that, there's no power imbalance as far as who's going to be vulnerable
Right.
and who's
Right.
going to be in a protected persona of, say, the
Right.
leader.
Right.
Um, there's a real symmetry to the vulnerability, ideally.
Yeah. Yeah, that's powerful. So this like I got a flashing light. I'm just gonna adjust that. Before you mentioned that the circle is embodied, and you know a mentor who joins the CCA who wants to start a circle in their school or start a circle in their community, start a chapter of Boys to Men. We're going to have some people on the CCA who are exactly in that position, in that purpose. Um, that could be in person, embodied, right? And but the CCA will be on Zoom, and so I think it's also worth mentioning that it's experiential. So you're going to actually live the modality that you're learning about, rather than just learning about it as a set of concepts or a set of ideas. You're going to actually practice and work within the modality, which is powerful. Not only in terms of um, the caliber of learning that can take place, but also in that it allows you to actually look at those things you just mentioned. Am I present? What stops me from being present? What stops me from really meeting someone where they're at in what they're sharing, in this truth that they're sharing into the space? Can I find my place of resonance with what they're saying? Or are they just some alien to me that I close down all my faculties towards and I just think about something else? And seeing this about ourselves. And one thing that I really feel is also powerful about what you said about presence is that circles are made of presence. The whether it's the facilitation or just the actual container of confidentiality in which people come to share vulnerably in that symmetry, in that circle in which all are on the same angle in a sense, right? Equivalently, um, that that relies 100% on presence. So, can you say a little bit more about that? What does it mean to be present, and how are you going to help people become more present?
Yeah, well, partly the experiential model itself creates presence. And then there'll also be some targeted learning around that, like self check-ins. We do breakout groups at the end, usually, or towards the end of the session where people can talk about the struggles that they're having with that. Um, in a circle, you can tell if someone's not present. You can feel it if you're
Mm-hmm.
sensitive to that. You'll either feel it consciously if you're maybe a bit more evolved or you're paying attention, you'll notice that someone's not present, or you'll just experience it as a sense of unease.
Mm-hmm.
Like it doesn't feel safe to tell the truth here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Boys to Men works with teenagers. Many teenagers are really perceptive
Mm-hmm.
about this. Um, if they sense incongruence in an adult, an example of incongruence in this context would be, oh, well, this person like says he's here to sit down with us, but he's off somewhere else thinking about tomorrow, thinking about some problem that he has, thinking about how anxious he is about sitting in a circle, attending to
Yeah.
that. Um, then they're not gonna feel trust
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that this um I don't want to use too much vocabulary, but we call a circle a container sometimes. But that this circle can contain my vulnerability,
Yeah.
that it's safe to be myself here.
Yeah. 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 So it's a bit of a kiln. It's a bit of a sort of um, a hot environment. That's maybe not the best way to put it. it's demanding that you show up in integrity to the purpose of learning these skills. Now, there's some people who, like I said, are coming into this with the intention of actually sitting in Boys to Men circle space and mentoring youth. What about someone who's not ready to make that commitment or not ready to make that choice? Are they also welcome to the CCA? And what does the CCA offer them?
Yeah, for sure. So I think it's general enough. It's not really, circles aren't boys to men specific. It's a really effective model of group therapy as well. Um, and the skills that you'll learn in the CCA aren't just going to be applicable to either of those things, a group therapy context or a group mentoring context.
Mm,
You'll just learn to be present and communicate better.
mm-hmm,
You'll
mm-hmm,
do better in your relationships. If you're
mm-hmm,
in business, you'll do better in business. If you're
mm,
in a workplace, you'll do better in your workplace. People will probably find you more enjoyable to be around
mm-hmm,
if if you understand the communication skills that we're introducing in the CCA. For myself, like a lot of this stuff was stuff that I learned when I joined Boys to Men 13 years ago,
mm-hmm,
and it really changed my life and relationships.
mm-hmm,
Um, I wouldn't say that I always was effective at using the skills that I learned all the time, but I always, if something didn't feel right in a relationship or I had an exchange that didn't feel like it went well, I would ask myself, well, was I using communication skills or was I on like default mode? Default mode for
mm-hmm.
me wasn't very good communication.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it's improved. It improved my life before I ever sat in a circle,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
learning the skills that are necessary to be in a circle. Did.
Yeah. 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 It's a unique space, circle space. It's highly intentional. It's not a conversational space. Um, and it really allows one to zoom in on aspects of what other people are relating to us in such a way that we listen really deeply. We listen to what's being said, we listen to what's not being said, and we also listen to our own reactions and our own kind of like inner phenomena. And I think all three of those um, ways of listening are super important in all of the areas that relationships express communication, um, whether that be in families and relationships or in workplace or even just on the street. Like being able to call those skills to bear is invaluable. I can echo largely what you said also. That in my life, I'm about 7 years deep in with Boys to Men Canada, and it's had a very profound impact on the way I communicate and the way I listen, and the
Mm,
way that I'm able to understand people and meet people where they are at. Because we learn in a circle that that person isn't speaking to me directly, they're speaking into the circle. And so stuff that's normally like quite triggering and quite personally engaging, that kind of irks us or gets us agitated or hot and bothered, we learn to actually acclimate to some of that material because we're not forced to respond necessarily. And if we're the facilitator,
hmm
we have a chance to point that human being or help support them in coming into contact with their own inner wisdom and inner resources around that thing. We have no responsibility to them on that level. We're not responsible for their stuff. We're responsible for keeping the container clean and open and available for those people to connect with their inner wisdom around what they're saying or what's materializing for them. Do you agree with that? Anything you want to add on that front?
Yeah, I agree. Um, yeah, not to, I guess, teach the course before the course happens, but one of the things that we talk about is advice.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that sort of speaks to a little bit about what we're both talking about here. Like in our culture, I don't know if it's specific to our culture. I know our culture best. Advice giving is very common, especially if you get vulnerable with someone and say, I'm having a problem with this. It's like advice right away. So one of
Hmm.
the rules of a circle is that we don't give advice in the circle.
Yeah.
Um, you can kind of imagine why, if you think about it for a second, you're in a circle with a bunch of people that you know to varying degrees. You're being invited to talk about a sensitive problem that you're having. And so then you do that. And in front of everyone, someone starts giving you advice. Like it's obnoxious,
Yeah.
to say the least.
Yeah.
Um, and so, but let's say you want to help that person. How would you help them without giving them advice? Like a lot of people don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah.
Um, so being in a circle gives you the opportunity to consider that question. How would I help someone without giving them advice or telling them what to do or trying to fix them? Is there
Yes.
another way?
Yes. Yes. And I mean, that's um, there's also you imparting your experience in leading circles and also your therapeutic experience and your social work experience around how to start cultivating that capacity. Um, because I think we all know what that feels like when we finally say the thing that we're so inner, like terrified inside of ourselves to say, and then someone's like, well, I know what you got to do. You just got to do this. Just do this. And we feel totally unmet in that. Um,
Hmm.
we know that um, that doesn't get anyone in that situation very far. It doesn't deepen the intimacy. It doesn't deepen the problem solving often. It doesn't deepen the self knowledge. So, how about one more question?
Sounds good to me.
Um, so we've talked a lot about um, what the CCA can offer people, whether they're potentially going to become a mentor with BTM Canada and work with youth, 13 to 25-year-old young men, or whether they're some kind of practitioner outside of uh, Boys to Men and are interested in upleveling their communication and their facilitation ability or ability to facilitate. Um, Yeah, as I'm saying that, I'm trying to formulate the question. So, what I want to know is why is something like this, or circles in general, relevant in our culture? Like
Mm.
you mentioned a little bit about that before, but what do you see happening inside our zeitgeist or inside our culture or inside our discourse, the way that we relate to one another, the way that we relate to truth, the way that we relate to youth, that you feel really is calling in truth telling circles, mentorship, and the training of adults to be mentors and facilitators?
Yeah, that kind of brings us full circle back to my first answer.
Mm.
Full circle. Get it? Um, sorry.
I actually didn't get it. I was like, why is he pausing?
Yeah,
Uh,
but so there, we do the circle takes place. It's a microculture in a you know, a contained microculture in a macroculture, macro meaning the larger.
mhm,
Um, and in many ways, it's a response to it.
mhm,
So what's going on in the macroculture? Um, a lot of people wearing personas they might not even realize that they're wearing. Um, a lot of people wearing a personality that they constructed instrumentally to get certain things done in their life or to stay safe in their life, but that nonetheless is less than being fully themselves. And we have a felt sense that that's less than being fully alive.
mm,
It can be a little bit vitality sapping.
mhm,
Um, I think all cultures have to exclude some things. Um, a culture, in order to be cohesive, can't allow all behaviors, all expressions, all things. Otherwise, it's not a culture.
Hmm.
Cultures have hierarchies of values. Cultures have norms and rules. And I think there's nothing inherently evil about that. That's that's what they do. They impose some order so that everyone can
Hmm.
get along.
Hmm.
But it excludes things. Um, and so what a circle does is it creates a space where those things can be included.
Hmm.
When they were invented, they were probably the original like inclusive space, sort
Mm,
of.
mm, mm,
Right now, there's this kind of push to make the macro culture into an inclusive place. Um, Everywhere that's tried, we can make this observation that there's this disintegration happening, like
mhm,
chaos follows. Differences actually get exacerbated, and then in an attempt to control that, the goal of inclusion always becomes authoritarian.
mm,
It's just it's just the natural way that things work.
mm.
So now instead of a non-authoritarian culture that nonetheless excluded things, now it's even more authoritarian because that's the counter reaction to trying to make it include everything.
Yeah,
Um, so in any culture, what probably makes more sense from a perspective of trying to keep it cohesive is you have these microcultures that are tolerated. Like sometimes it's felt like boys early on in Boys to Men, it felt sometimes like what we were doing was like tolerated.
mm,
Um, because it's like a little weird. Like what? All these boys getting together to tell the truth? Why? Why can't they just
mhm,
tell the truth everywhere? Well, it's
mhm.
because there's certain things that don't fit into that culture, and that's okay.
Yeah,
But they still need to find expression somewhere in a positive way,
yeah,
or they'll find expression in a negative way.
yeah.
Um, I'm losing track of the original question, but that's kind of what a circle is. It's like a container where what's not normally included in the macroculture can be included and worked with and dealt with and integrated in a healthy way.
Yeah, yeah. I really love what you said. I love this idea of um, the circle being like the original inclusive environment, um, because uh, it's true where it's a space because it's so highly intentional and facilitated. Things can be shared that within the normal dynamics of everyday life or the macro culture, as you put it, some of those things can be very incendiary and can be very difficult to reckon with. They can raise alarm bells. They can make people uncomfortable. They can cause arguments, this sort of thing. But the way that a circle is set up is really to metabolize those things,
Hmm.
to digest them, so that you have a place to dump. You have a place to dump your stuff. And for a youth, that's like invaluable because if you do that inside a classroom, you get removed. If you do that inside a family system, there's a gamble there. Are you going to be met in that? Or are you going to be, in your child mind, abandoned, right? Whether that's abandoned in terms of intimacy with the parent or kicked out of the house or whatever it may be. Um, and within intimate relationships, we know the struggles there too. So it's like this setting up this sort of pillow fort environment in which to let um, difficult realities, difficult energies, difficult um, revelations come to light. And there is a collective metabolizing that takes place there. That's, I think, it's super, super important. Um, Wonderful. Well, looks like you wanted to throw something in there.
Perceptive. Yeah, I was about to like go further into that tangent. Do you want to do that?
Why not? Let's take a little.
Okay.
Let's go a little deeper. Let's spelunk a little deeper.
Okay. Yeah, well, I was just going to give an example. You
Okay.
know, Let's take the example of childhood trauma. I did most
Mm-hmm.
of my childhood trauma work in circles.
Mm-hmm.
That ended up being what was effective for me. Um, I went and saw counselors. Cognitive behavioral therapy wasn't doing it. Um, Circles worked for me because my upbringing was traumatic enough that I needed the level of safety that
Mm-hmm.
a circle could offer. And I'm a sensitive person, so I was keenly aware of any environment that wasn't safe to do that in. And I don't
Mm-hmm.
have a beef with that. Like the classroom probably wasn't the place for my trauma. I felt that sense. And attempts to turn a classroom, for example, into that go poorly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I did my undergrad in criminology, and one of the topics that was kind of off limit in class was sexual assault
Mm-hmm.
because there might be people in the class who'd experienced that.
Yeah.
I had experienced that.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have a problem with it, but some people had a problem discussing it even. But
Yeah.
it's a good object example of here we are here to learn about crime and deviance in a place of learning, hopefully to learn about those things in a deep and meaningful way, and we can't even talk about it because we're trying to turn it into a place where people's trauma is included.
Yeah.
Doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't work. Um, and it's possible to say that, I think, without being uncompassionate. What a culture actually needs is a place where those things are welcome and can be honored properly.
Mm-hmm.
The classroom's not it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's a function that a circle
Mm-hmm.
can serve, is a
Yeah.
place where these things can be included, worked with, and as you said, metabolized and honored properly.
Yeah.
And it's the reason that um, yeah, would I go so far as to circles or something like it is necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if we had them everywhere, we would feel less guilty about excluding people's trauma from the classrooms because there was an appropriate and more meaningful place for them to put it
Mm.
and work with it.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah,
It's a great one. You know, it's interesting to ask the question like what it means to include it, because you said that in your example, like trauma is included in in um, in the classroom dynamic, because we can't talk about this thing because it may trigger a traumatic response in someone, right? Um,
we have to go with the
and
not talking about it option because you can't talk about it either because you
hmm
can't honor it properly and you can't
hmm
heal it properly in a classroom. We
right,
kind of know that there's not,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
it's impractical to the point of impossibility.
yeah,
So we just have to kind of, work around it, which you can't do in
hmm
some contexts. Sometimes that's just
yeah,
not going to be possible
yeah,
without
and
corrupting the original mission of why you're there.
yeah, and the contradiction in the culture of like we're becoming so much more trauma sensitive and so much more aware of the impact of this upon people and how they show up in the world, and yet in that sensitivity and in the enforcement of that perspective, we may not be offering people the opportunity to actually address it or to work with it or to honor it or bear witness to it. And that is what a circle provides. Like that is what's being called in through a circle, I think, is that people can find safety there. And you said that like a circle for you was more safe than a one-on-one therapeutic relationship. And I think I know why. I think because there's more presence. When we have a group of human
Mm.
beings who are locked in to being present to what someone is sharing without taking it personally, there is a sort of upliftment that takes place that is very natural to us as human beings, being social animals. And the um, atomization of people that has taken place through social media and our current media technology world, we get these like really low grade experiences of presence in which people kind of see our post and give it a like or something, but they're not necessarily like really meeting us in where we're at. Whereas a circle is like a profound experience of being met and being witnessed and being accompanied in our life, right? Because you go to that circle each week and you share about what's going on in your life in a way that you may not do anywhere else, even if those people aren't your friends or you don't have a personal relationship with them. um, you are being you are being witnessed, you are being seen, and it's like the eyes of a higher power looking through all the eyes in the circle upon you. And in some people, that's their experience, that there's a palpable spiritual energy to it. I know for me there is.
Yeah, me
So
too.
yeah.
It's a little bit hard to pin down, but um, definitely. And then
Mm,
there's also this sense that like the power level of a circle just like goes up and up and up. It's like it
yeah,
always takes that one first person to like put some skin in the game, right?
yeah,
Like to talk about something truly difficult or truly painful or show some
yeah,
emotion. And that
yeah,
goes well if everyone's present. It goes
yeah,
into the circle and everyone's present and it goes well and everyone's encouraged by that. Like they
yeah,
feel more courageous.
yeah, yeah,
And then the next person does it and it just
yeah,
builds.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I'm getting I'm getting excited. It's very
Yeah.
exciting because this
Yeah,
is
me
what we
too.
want.
Yeah.
This is what
Yeah.
we want for youth and for adults also, right? To come into that, once you experience it and you've benefited from it, you know it's good because you want to share it. You want others to experience it and you want others to benefit from it in the same way you have. That's like the proof that the fruits are good. Um, so the Circle Culture Academy starts in January, I believe, January 17th. Is that correct?
So we're starting on January 17th and it'll run 10 consecutive weeks. The time will be for people in the Eastern time zone, 7:30 p.m., or for those, say, in the Pacific time zone, it'll be 4:30 p.m. And the session length's going to run an hour and a half, max 2 hours. And the reason that's flexible is it depends on the amount of participants we get. I want everyone to have enough airtime to participate properly. And if there's a lot of people, then it might make sense to go up to 2 hours.
Yes. And you can find a link in the description to register for the CCA 2024, January 17th.